Okay, so when does a really powerful belief cross the line and become, well, a dangerous certainty? And what happens when that certainty just smashes right up against the basic human need to care for someone else? That's what we're digging into today. It's this incredible tension, right? A conflict that can literally have life or death consequences. And we're going to explore it through a story that, wow, it really forces you to ask some tough questions. So, to get our heads around this whole clash between certainty and care, we're going to start with a story. And I gotta warn you, it's pretty dramatic, pretty unsettling. It's the kind of story that just forces you to face these questions head on. All right, let's set the scene. The date and location are really specific. We're talking about the Bay of Bengal, near an island that is, for all intents and purposes, completely cut off from the modern world. And this is where we meet our main figure, John Allen Chow. He wasn't just some random adventurer, you know? He'd actually been training for this specific moment for years. And his goal? To make contact with the Sentinelese people, a tribe that's been almost completely isolated for, well, for thousands of years. But he wasn't just going there to say hello. His goal, his entire purpose, was to convert them to Christianity. And his conviction? It was absolute. He truly believed it was his sacred duty to bring his faith to this island, no matter the risk to himself or, the impact it might have on their ancient way of life. And this quote from his final diary entry really says it all. You can hear his mindset in his own words. He knew how dangerous it was. He absolutely knew. But his faith, that certainty he had in his mission, it was so strong that it pushed aside even that most basic instinct to survive. So what happened? Well, the outcome was tragic, but maybe not all that surprising. The Sentinelese have a long, long history of violently rejecting outsiders. It's how they protect their way of life, how they protect themselves from disease. So they met his persistence with lethal force. They killed him. And this is the question at the heart of it all. How do we see this? Was it an act of profound, unshakable faith? Or was it a tragic failure to care? I mean, did his absolute conviction just blind him to the needs and, frankly, the very clear wishes of the people he was trying to save? This is the dilemma, right? And it sets up everything else we're going to talk about. Okay, so to even begin to answer a question like that, we're going to need a different kind of tool, a new framework. So let's talk about something called an ethic of care. It's a totally different way of looking at moral problems. So think of it like this. On one side, you've got your traditional ethics of justice. This is all about big, universal rules and being impartial. Stuff like thou shalt not steal, a rule that applies to everyone, everywhere, no exceptions. But an ethic of care, it starts in a completely different place. It's way less about those abstract rules and way more about the relationships we have, the specific situation we're in, and actually responding to the needs of the real person standing right in front of us. So here's a more formal way to put it. It's a moral approach that's all about that web of relationships we're all in. The focus is on our responsibility to respond to what other people actually need, right here, right now. It's not about some clean, abstract rulebook. It's about the messy, complicated, real world of human connection. Now, here is a really powerful and, for some people, pretty shocking example of this idea in action. The philosopher Nell Noddings, she looks at that famous story of Abraham being willing to sacrifice his son, Isaac. And she calls it horrendous. Why? Because from her point of view, Abraham chose a command from an abstract, unseen God over the real, touchable child right there in front of him. That's a huge clash in what you prioritize, isn't it? And that brings us right back to the dark side of this whole thing. What happens when conviction gets so strong, so absolute, that it just crushes our ability to care for other people? This quote from historian Arthur Schlesinger really takes this idea and zooms out. It's not just about one person on one island. He's pointing out that this isn't some new problem. For centuries, the conviction that you're carrying out God's plan has been used to justify, well, some truly awful things. And sadly, we don't have to look far for some devastating modern examples. The source material we're looking at points to cases within both the Catholic Church and the Southern Baptist Convention. What happened? Well, the drive to protect the institution's reputation, which is an abstract thing, right? And to follow the internal rules, that led to protecting abusers. And the victims, the actual people who were in desperate need of care, they were ignored, they were shunned, they were silenced.
It's a heartbreaking example of a system being cared for more than the people inside it.
But what if care itself can be an act of defiance? I mean, look at this. This incredible piece of art, The Mothers by Kathe Kollitz. It brings to life this fascinating retelling of the Exodus story. In this version, the Israelite mothers see the Egyptian families suffering, and they actually defy God's command. They work to save the children of the very people who enslaved them. I mean, what a radical idea. It's an act of care that crosses enemy lines and even stands up to a divine order. So, does all this mean that faith is always the enemy of care? No, not at all. Actually, the sources are really clear on this. Spirituality can also be one of the most powerful drivers for compassionate connection.
Let's just look at a few examples. In some Jewish thought, the entire Torah is seen as being built on the foundation of caring and being cared for. Or think about many indigenous spiritualities, where justice isn't about punishment at all. It's about preservative care for, well, for everything, for all relationships, including with the land. And then there's the African ethos of Ubuntu. You've probably heard the phrase, "I am because you are." It just so beautifully captures this idea that my humanity is completely tied up in yours.
And this really brings it down to a personal level. This isn't some big abstract principle. This is a letter from a father to a son who's off at war. And he's using his faith to express this incredibly deep, personal, active care. His belief in a God that's always there, always ready to help, that belief is what's directly fueling his own love and concern for his son. Okay, so where does that leave us? How do we navigate this complex world? How do we hold on to our strong beliefs without letting them build a wall that blocks out care? Well, the sources suggest there's a really crucial tool for this. And that tool is something called intellectual humility. It sounds complicated, but it's actually super simple. Even if it's hard to do, it's just the act of admitting, hey, maybe I don't have all the answers. And that little bit of humility, that's what pries open the door to actually listening to someone else. Because if you're not 100% certain you're right, you can finally become truly attentive to what another person actually needs and what they're trying to tell you. And wow, this painting, Cemetery Bench by Felix Nussbaum, it just seems to capture everything we've been talking about. What you're seeing are his own parents, mourning in a graveyard that's filled with symbols from a faith that isn't theirs. It just speaks volumes about how fragile care is, how it's passed down from parents to children, and how it can exist even when you're surrounded by immense loss and different beliefs. This is what's at stake. And so that brings us to the final question, the one I really want to leave you with. In a world that seems to reward the loudest voice, the strongest conviction, the most absolute certainty, how do we do it? How do we, in our own lives, in our families, in our communities, how do we carve out that quiet, humble, attentive space that's needed for real, genuine care?